And it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, John Navarro, who will speak on Lake Erie grass carp response strategy. John received his bachelor's and master's degrees in natural resources and fisheries management from The Ohio State University. After working for Battelle Memorial Institute for 10 years in Ohio, Georgia, Alaska, and Michigan, John joined the Division of Wildlife as a fisheries biologist in 1997. He then became the hatchery program administrator in 2000 before becoming the aquatic stewardship program administrator in 2005. I will pass things over to you, John.
Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Great. So I'm going to jump right in. Thanks for the opportunity to speak about this. So okay, for some reason it's not advancing. There. So what I'm going to talk about today are not bighead, silver, or black carp. I will be talking about the fourth invasive carp in the invasive carp family, which is grass carp. So grass carp were brought to the US in the 60s as a biological control for aquatic vegetation. They're very good at managing that. And it is, some people feel it's better than throwing chemicals in the water body as a biological control. You don't have to do that. We started requiring sterile fish in the 1980s because of concern about escaped fish. We did see grass carp in Lake Erie in the 1980s, but back then we just always assumed that they were sterile triploids. As I'll show in a minute, that's not the case anymore. Like I said, we do have enforcement. We require that triploid or sterile fish be used. We feel that's a good compromise. And we do have active enforcement. We do checks on people who are selling grass carp. We do check for ploidy just to ensure that they're following the rules and following the Fish and Wildlife Service's certification program. And the concern is habitat, them overwhelming the system. Here's what it looks like in the US for grass carp regulations. You have the most restrictive states, which are in red, which don't allow any grass carp. You do have states still in Ohio and the US that allow fertile or diploid grass carp, which is a concern. But like I said, Ohio allows triploid grass carp because we do feel it's a good tool for vegetation control. We even use it ourselves on some of our water bodies, and we feel that's the prudent thing to do. Here's kind of a map. We kind of have this line in the sand to prevent all invasive carp from getting into Lake Erie, and others are doing the same to keep them out of the Great Lakes. The problem is grass carp seem to have made it past this barrier, which is problematic. A little background on how we do planning coordination. As I'll show, we do have reproducing grass carp in the western basin of Lake Erie. So the statutory authority goes to the Michigan DNR and Ohio DNR. But Lake Erie, we're part of a bigger family. So we also coordinate activities with the Lake Erie Committee, which is facilitated by the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. So we also work with New York, Pennsylvania, and in the province of Ontario. So we do work as a larger group in planning activities. And then the support component, we do have a lot of people helping us out with the science. We do have a lot of plans. Plans aren't fun to develop, but boy, they are handy when people are asking what are you doing about the problem. We have a suite of them, and the one I'm going to talk about mainly is this Lake Erie grass carp response strategy. So we developed this strategy using what's called a structured decision-making process. This was facilitated by Michigan DNR through Michigan State University. And this is a process a lot of people use to tackle complicated problems. It has a series of steps you go through. What's good about it is you have clear objectives you're working with. You look at trade-offs on different alternatives. You're looking at uncertainty, because especially with grass carp, we don't know everything about them. It's a transparent process. We had a lot of people in the room when we developed what came out of this STM process, and it does integrate public values. So after this process, these are the 5 outcomes from the STM process. The first one, which is illustrated by that picture in the lower left, is we want to get fish out of the system. It's pretty simple. And the modeling they did early on said that if we could remove 390 diploid grass carp per year, that we would be able to suppress this population. We're going to redo this model. That model's a little old. We got more data, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of number we come up with. The gear we're using is a combination of an entanglement gear called a trammel net and electrofishing, which is shown in that bottom right-hand picture. We call it the DFO method. The Oceans and Fisheries of Canada came up with this method, and it's very effective. The people in that boat there's a DFO employee, a UT employee, USGS, and it's one of our boats. So that's called working together on a problem. So we do use that paired method. We're also looking at using electrofishing by itself, but that's still being worked on. We do work with our commercial fishermen. They happen to be very good at catching these things. And one thing I'll talk about is we've moved towards dedicated strike teams that their only job is to find and collect and remove grass carp. We also have a lot of science going on, trying to figure out how many grass carp are out there. And like I said, we're working on gear efficiency models too. And then the last thing, which I'll finish the talk with, is we're looking at the possibility of putting a barrier in the Sandusky River, which is where the spawning activity is taking place. So this is what the plan looks like. And it has 2 main goals: is to prevent expansion of grass carp from the Western Basin of Lake Erie, and to prevent the population in the Western Basin from reaching levels that are detrimental. So here's kind of a picture where we're at. The Western Basin of Lake Erie is in the red circle. That's where the reproduction is taking place. 2 locations are the Sandusky River by Sandusky, and then the Maumee River up by Toledo. The main problem is the Sandusky River, and that's where most of our effort is taking place. The one thing we found is that Lake Erie is very big. It's about the size of Vermont. So trying to find a fish out in the main lake is pretty much near impossible, but we have gotten very effective at removing them from the Sandusky and Maumee rivers during high flow conditions, during warmer water, when the fish are coming in to spawn. We've gotten pretty good at it. Here's the numbers for the last 3 years. We're not at 390, but we're trying to get closer to it. It's not through lack of effort. We have a lot of gear out there. They're just not out there in high numbers. So we're feeling pretty good that we're whacking these things. And as you can see, the Sandusky River stands out as with the highest number of captures. Ploidy is a problem. If all these bars were in the teal color, we'd be okay because they couldn't reproduce. But we're getting 50% plus of grass carp that can reproduce, and that's the problem. So here's kind of the knowledge gaps we're filling. We are looking at the ploidy, fertile versus sterile. We are working with our commercial fishermen. Like I said, they're very good at this. We're working with USGS and UT, University of Toledo, on egg and larval collections. And this is very important. We've been looking at systems outside of the Sandusky and Maumee, looking for other systems that might be contributing fish to the population. But so far, we're only finding them rarely in the Maumee and in the Sandusky River when conditions are right. We do have fish with telemetry tags in them. This was a little controversial with some of our partners in putting an invasive species back into the system. But the fact that we're able to track these fish and sometimes through our live receivers on the Sandusky and Maumee, this is really, really important in providing an early detection tool for when these things are coming in and when we need to ramp up efforts. We are also looking at modeling of spawning locations using some models that USGS has developed, looking at where eggs are collected and then back calculating where they came from, very handy, in locating hatch locations. And that's where we're whacking them. And then also looking at vegetation mapping, where the food is. So in the past, we were doing these planned actions. They were over 3 days, once a year, and they were effective, but it's really only a snapshot, and it was hit or miss if you're hitting the river at the right temperature and flow conditions. So we did learn a lot from these things, for these activities. A lot of partners came and helped us, but we're getting away from this kind of activity, and we're going towards more of that targeted effort through mostly University of Toledo, but the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is helping, and Michigan DNR is coming down and helping, so we can get a lot of boats on the water and nets out, and can really ramp up our efforts. As I said, the 390s are target for annual removal. As I said, we are tracking tagged fish with real-time receivers, really giving us great information on movements of grass carp, not only when they're coming into the river, but how far they move around Lake Erie and even up into Lake Erie using the GLADO system, which is an array of receivers that are out in the Great Lakes. We are estimating the catchability of grass carp using surrogate species. Looks like we're about 50% effective at if a grass carp is in the area that we'll get our hands on it. Still doing research on understanding spawning. And then I'm going to finish up on this barrier feasibility on the Sandusky River. So the idea is to prevent grass carp from getting to those spawning locations. Not all of them, we'd never be able to do that, but if we feel that if we could block 75% of the adult grass carp that encounter the barrier along with removal activities, that will be pretty effective in making the Sandusky River a non-contributor. AECOM did the preliminary assessment, and what they came up with was a bunch of different possibilities. But what we're looking at mainly is using acoustics, which is sound, and an air bubble curtain in combination that's being used in other locations for the other invasive carp. And we think this would be a good system to use on the Sandusky. It doesn't have to be year round, only during that sweet spot when the temperatures are high and we'll get high flow events. Otherwise, the fish just aren't moving into the system. So one of the ideas AECOM came up with was a physical barrier. We do not want to do this. We just removed the Ballville Dam on the Sandusky River in Fremont. The last thing we want to do is put another chunk of concrete in the river. It would not go over well, and we don't feel like this is the right tool for the Sandusky River. So what we're looking at is a behavioral barrier in this location here at the city of Fremont. This is what it would look like from an aerial. So you can see the flow heading towards Lake Erie. We're putting the barrier right at this Brady's Island to keep fish from getting upstream, which is where the spawning locations are. This location affords us a few good things. Is ODNR owns that property on the right descending bank. We have a boat ramp right there, which is handy. And then we also, with that Brady's Island, might be able to put in a trapping device to herd fish and then aid in our removal. So a couple of benefits in this location. Like I said, we're looking at sound and air bubble combination. It's being used elsewhere. So we think it could be effective in the Sandusky River. So where we're at now is we did the feasibility study, but right now the Army Corps of Engineers has funding through GLRI to do what they call the federal interest determination, which is going to be starting shortly once they get their funding. And then it'll move into additional feasibility and design. And then hopefully if funding's available, we'll move into construction. So finally, here are the key points is we're targeting tributaries that have spawning. So far we're targeting the Sandusky and Maumee rivers. The lead agencies in this effort are Michigan and Ohio DNRs. But like I said, we're part of a bigger family. So we're working through the Great Lakes Fishery Commission's Lake Erie Committee for any bigger decisions that need to be made. The support from the federal partners and the universities is key. That we've really learned a lot more about these fish. We wouldn't be doing anything without the GLRI, Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding. If we didn't have that, it would be, I don't know, it'd be much less effort going on just because we don't have the funding to do this kind of effort. And there was a process in developing the plan that we're doing through the Stm process. And it is an adaptive management where we're learning every day. So we're being adaptive to the situation as it changes. So I don't know how I'm doing on time, but that is what I have, and I can take any questions.
You are right on schedule. Thank you so much, John. We do have time for some questions. Our first is, are you tagging diploid or triploid grass carp, and is there a difference in movement between the two?
So the problem is to do ploidy analysis, you need to, what we've been doing is removing the eyeball and sending them to La Crosse, Wisconsin. So you don't want to beat up a fish and put a tag in it and throw it in the river. It's non-productive. So really, we don't know the ploidy when we tag them. So we are tagging both triploid and diploid. And a great question. They're still analyzing the data, but it would be really interesting to see if there's differences in movement, because boy, if there wasn't, we could just tag triploids.
The next question is any of the research on the barrier considering broader uses for other invasive species other than just grass carp?
So no, but basically it's the other way around. We're using studies that are going on Barkley Lock and Dam on the Ohio River. That's being done by the Fish and Wildlife Service. The USGS is doing similar studies on the Mississippi River, and those are both for bighead and silver carp. So we're kind of learning from those efforts for this effort. Hopefully bighead and silver respond in a similar fashion because they're getting really good results out of those studies. So would it be used for bighead and silver in the future in Lake Erie? Yeah, of course. Hopefully we never have to cross that bridge. I'm hoping they don't show up.
Okay, our next question is, are you pulling up a lot of the tagged fish when you guys are doing your removal efforts?
Yeah, we do. We do come up with them, and they do have an external tag, so we do know when we get one. And so we put them right back in the water and let them keep telling us where their friends are.
Great. That is all the questions we have. So if any more pop up and there's time at the end, maybe we'll address them then. But for now, we will move on to our next topic. So thank you again, John.
Yeah, thanks.